luxury cruise. Her reaction? A sudden slap, sharp and echoing through the room. "Then find somewhere else to live," she shouted. My own son nodded beside her. "We'll take every cent from you," he said quietly. I left their house with no plan, my heart pounding. 2 days later, everything had changed, and I'm glad you're here to hear the rest. Stay with me until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. The tension started when I said the words that set the whole house on fire. "I'm not paying for your anniversary cruise, Lilia." Her face hardened, the glossy brochure crumpling in her hand. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice colder than ice. I straightened my back. "You heard me." The answer is no. The silence was thick. David, my only child, sat frozen, eyes darting between us. I knew which side he'd choose. Lilia stood towering over me. "This isn't a request." "I understand perfectly," I said, and still, no. The slap came fast, the sting racing down my neck. "Then leave," she screamed. "I'm tired of supporting a selfish woman who won't help her own family." I looked at David, hoping for support. Instead, he whispered, "Maybe it's time you found your own place. We've carried you long enough." That betrayal cut deeper than the slap. I had raised him alone, worked double shifts, sacrificed everything, and this was my reward. I reminded them I'd been paying rent, buying groceries, even helping with their car down payment. Lilia laughed. $800 a month? That's nothing. David makes 6 figures. Your help is pocket change. Then why need my $50,000 for a cruise? I asked. David's eyes flashed with resentment. Because we deserve it, Mom. We've earned a luxury vacation. You're just hoarding money you'll never use. Lilia sneered. You're 62. No friends, no life. Let your family enjoy it. I steadied my voice. I'm saving for emergencies. This is an emergency, David said. Our marriage needs this trip. If you can't support that, maybe rethink what family means. I barely recognized him, so cold, so distant. I see, I whispered, standing. I'll pack my things. Lilia smirked. And don't try to guilt us. David agrees completely. I walked toward the stairs, hoping for one last sign of love. Mom, wait, David called. Hope flickered, then died. I'll need every penny you have. The $50,000 plus whatever else you've saved. Consider it payback for everything we've given you. I turned away, numb. 2 suitcases, a box of photo albums. That was my entire life. As I carried my bags down, I heard Lilia on the phone, cheerful now. Yes, Mom. She finally agreed to move out. David and I can finally have our house back. I paused at the bottom of the stairs, hearing Lilia spin her own version of the story. To her mother on the phone, I was the generous mother-in-law who had chosen to give them space and even promised to help pay for their anniversary cruise. A perfect little fiction. David was nowhere in sight when I reached the door, likely hiding in his office, unwilling to face the wreckage he'd helped create. I set down my bags and glanced around the house one last time. Granite countertops, gleaming hardwood floors, all of it partly mine. At least it had been. I'd given them $20,000 from a lifetime of tips and overtime when they married, scrubbing floors and pouring coffee for decades to save it. Now I was the unwelcome guest. Outside, the cool evening air wrapped around me. My 15-year-old Honda waited in the driveway like a faithful old friend. One thing in my life that was truly mine. I loaded my suitcases, climbed into the driver's seat, and gripped the wheel. At 62, I was effectively homeless. No relatives to call, no close friends left. Most had drifted away, or been quietly pushed aside by Lilia's subtle control. Tears came hot and fast. My only child had chosen greed over love, throwing away the mother who'd worked herself raw to raise him. I started the car and drove through quiet neighborhoods, past warm, glowing houses where families probably cherished one another, past diners where I'd once served strangers with a smile. The life I'd built felt like it belonged to someone else. Hours later, I parked at a 24-hour diner and caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My left cheek was still red from Lilia's slap, my eyes swollen from crying. I looked like what I was, a woman discarded. But beneath the humiliation, a new feeling stirred. Faint but undeniable. Maybe anger. Maybe the first spark of understanding that I deserved better. I checked my bank balance, $87,000. Not a fortune, but far more than Lilia imagined. Every dollar earned from backbreaking shifts. Every penny a reminder of years I'd believed I was building a future for my family. I finally saw the truth. I'd been building a cage of guilt and obligation, hoping for love from people who only saw a bank account. For 3 days, I lived out of that car, drifting from parking lot to parking lot. Nights spent curled in the back seat, every sound a threat. By the 4th morning, I found myself at the harbor, drawn by the cry of gulls and the silver morning light dancing on the water. Massive cruise ships gleamed in the sun, their white hulls promising escape. I'd never set foot on one, but I'd always wondered what it might feel like to sail away from every problem. And then I saw him, a figure on the upper deck of the largest ship, crisp white captain's uniform catching the light, silver hair stirring in the breeze. Even after 40 years, I knew that profile. The strong jaw, the calm, deliberate way he moved. James Morrison, my heart stumbled. My first love, the man I'd once planned to marry before life pulled us apart. I hadn't seen him since 1983, when we were both 22 and certain we had all the time in the world. I froze on the dock, suddenly aware of my worn jeans and messy ponytail, the same clothes I'd left in. But before I could slip away, his gaze found mine. Recognition flared instantly. He smiled, that same smile that once made my teenage heart race, and lifted a hand in greeting. Then he moved, striding toward the gangway. "Marlene Patterson," he called, his voice carrying across the water. Hearing my maiden name after so many years brought fresh tears to my eyes. "It's Marlene Cooper now," I answered, though a part of me wondered if that was even true anymore. Was I still a Cooper when my own son had turned his back on me? James jogged down the gangway, and I saw it clearly. The years had treated him well. He was still tall and lean, though his hair had turned completely silver and fine lines. Framed eyes that had spent decades reading the horizon. "My God," he said when he stopped a few feet away. "Marlene, after all these years." "Hello, James." Suddenly I felt 22 again, standing in the marine supply shop, where we'd met one summer long ago. He studied my face, concern softening his smile. "You look like someone who could use a strong cup of coffee and a real meal." I gave a shaky laugh. "That obvious?" "I've spent 40 years at sea," he said. "I can read the weather in a person's eyes the way I read storm clouds." He motioned toward the massive ship behind him. "Come aboard. Let's catch up properly." "I don't want to impose." "I'm not exactly dressed for a tour of a cruise ship." "Marlene," he said gently, "I'm the captain. I can invite anyone I choose, and right now I'm inviting an old friend who looks like she needs someone to listen." The simple kindness nearly undid me. It had been so long since anyone spoke without expecting something in return. I followed him up the gangway, amazed at the ship's scale. "You really became the captain," I said. "You always said you would." "The Sea Star," he replied proudly. 1,500 passengers, 600 crew. She's been my home for 10 years. Inside, the corridors gleamed like a floating luxury hotel. Marble floors, chandeliers, artwork on every wall. We passed elegant dining rooms, theaters, even a small shopping arcade. "Wait until you see the captain's quarters," he said with a grin. The cabin took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows over the harbor, a sitting room, a dining area, a full kitchen. "Coffee?" he asked, moving toward the gleaming kitchenette. "Please." I sank into a chair, still stunned. 4 days earlier, I'd been sleeping in my car. Now I was in the private suite of the man I once loved. He handed me a steaming mug and sat across from me. "So," he said, blue eyes intent, "what brings you to my harbor looking like you've sailed through a storm?" I sipped the perfect coffee and began. I told him everything. Richard leaving when David was small, the years of double shifts, David's marriage to Lilia, the slow loss of my own life inside their house. I told him about the demand for $50,000, the slap, the nights in my car. James listened without a word, his expression darkening as I spoke. When I finished, he leaned forward. "Let me get this straight. Your son and his wife demanded $50,000 from you, and when you refused, they threw you out? It sounds worse when you say it like that," I whispered. "It is that bad, Marlene. That's financial abuse, and throwing you out is abandonment. It's not just cruel. It's wrong." The words hit hard. "How much have you given them over the years?" he asked. I tallied it: 20,000 for the wedding, 15 for the house down payment, another 60 in rent and groceries. "Nearly 100,000, James said quietly. "Unbelievable. I just wanted to help. He's my son, and you're his mother. That responsibility goes both ways." He paced the room, then stopped. "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know. Find a cheap apartment, maybe a job if anyone will hire me at my age." I tried to shrug it off. James stared out at the harbor for a long moment before turning back with an unreadable look. What if there's another option? What do you mean? Marlene, I'm not only the captain of this ship, he said, leaning forward. I'm part owner of the entire line, Morrison Maritime. We started small 20 years ago. Now we run 12 ships around the world. We're always searching for experienced people for our management team. James, I appreciate the thought, but I don't know anything about cruise lines. You know customer service. You know how to handle difficult people, balance tight budgets, solve problems in real time. You've been doing that your whole life, and you understand sacrifice and leadership. Those are exactly the qualities we need. I stared at him, speechless, the possibilities widening like the open sea. Are you offering me a job? I asked. I'm offering you a partnership, James replied, his eyes steady and intent. Morrison Maritime is expanding. We need someone to oversee guest services across the entire fleet, someone who understands what it means to make people feel welcome and valued. Someone who knows what it's like when the people who should care about you don't. The offer was so unexpected, so generous that I could barely process it. James, I can't. I don't know the first thing about running a business. You know more than you think, he said with a quiet smile. And you'd have the best teacher in the industry, me. A warmth stirred in my chest, a feeling I hadn't allowed myself in years. Hope, possibility. But why? I asked. He looked out the window, the harbor lights reflecting in his eyes. Do you remember the night before you left for Chicago? I did. I'd earned a scholarship to business school, and he had accepted his first post as a junior officer on a cargo ship. We'd known our paths were pulling us apart. I should have asked you to marry me that night, he said softly. I should have found a way to make it work. Instead, I let you go. That's one of my biggest regrets. My breath caught. I'm not saying this to pressure you, he continued. I'm saying it because I never stopped caring. If I can give you the chance to start fresh, after everything they put you through, maybe I can make up for some of that lost time. Outside, the harbor buzzed with people building their futures. For years, I'd existed only to serve other people's dreams. I don't know anything about partnerships, I said slowly. Then, it's a good thing you'll have an excellent teacher, he replied. So Marlene, are you ready to sail toward a new life? I thought about my car in the parking lot, packed with the last pieces of my old life. About David and Lilia, likely booking the cruise they planned to pay for with my money. Maybe it was time to stop being the victim in my own story. Yes, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Yes, I am. The next 6 weeks moved like a whirlwind. Every morning I arrived at Morrison Maritime's glass-walled headquarters, overlooking the harbor, and dove headfirst into learning everything about the cruise industry. Guest services protocols, safety regulations, staff management, vendor contracts, food and beverage operations. At first it was overwhelming, but slowly the puzzle pieces clicked into place. Decades of customer service experience became the foundation for hospitality management. Years of stretching every dollar turned into fleet-wide cost optimization. You're a natural, James said one afternoon as we reviewed guest satisfaction surveys. I'm just using common sense, I replied, though pride warmed my voice. People want to feel valued. They want their problems solved quickly and their good times enhanced. You'd be amazed how many forget that, he said with a grin. They chase numbers and forget that we're in the business of creating memories. During this time, I stayed in a company apartment, a sunlit one-bedroom overlooking the water. Freedom to decide where I wanted to live still felt surreal. 3 weeks into my training, James made it official. I signed the papers, a 25% partnership in Morrison Maritime, full authority over guest services across the entire fleet. My investment? The same $50,000 I had refused to hand over to Lilia. Money that now worked for me, not for someone else's luxury. Are you sure about this? I asked James as we sat in the lawyer's office. The biggest risk I ever took, he said, eyes never leaving mine, was letting you walk away 40 years ago. I'm not making that mistake twice. The connection between us was undeniable, but we moved carefully. Most evenings we shared dinner, sometimes a fine restaurant, sometimes simple takeout in his apartment, talking for hours about the past, the business, and the future. I was changing. I felt it in the way I stood in meetings, in the confidence that colored my voice. For the first time in decades, I wasn't apologizing for existing. I wasn't grateful for scraps of attention. I was contributing something real, and people respected me for it. The transformation even showed on the outside. James insisted I update my wardrobe for my new role, and shopping for professional attire became a revelation. For years, I'd dressed only for practicality. Cheap, durable, forgettable. Now my closet held tailored blazers, sleek dresses, and shoes that made me feel powerful instead of invisible. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a confident businesswoman, not a discarded mother. My phone stayed silent. No calls, no texts. David and Lilia hadn't checked on me once. Their silence said everything. That ended on a Tuesday afternoon. I was reviewing Caribbean staffing schedules when David's name lit up my screen. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. "Hello, David. Mom, where are you?" "I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I'm exactly where you told me to be," I said evenly, living my own life. "Look, about that night," he began, voice tight. "Lilia feels bad." "We both do. Why don't you come home and we'll talk like adults?" I almost laughed. "Come home? You made it clear I don't have a home with you? Don't be dramatic, Mom. We were just stressed about money, and you decided your stress was my responsibility to fix." I cut in, keeping my tone professional. "What do you need, David?" A pause. "We're having cash flow problems." Lilia invested in a friend's startup. It collapsed. "How much?" I asked. "Most of our savings," he admitted. "About $40,000. Now we can't make the mortgage payment, and the cruise line wants the balance for our booking. So that was it. Not regret, not love. Need. And you thought I'd just hand over another $40,000? Mom, please. We're family. The bank's talking foreclosure. If we can't pay for this cruise, Lilia says she can't stay married to a financial failure. The old me would have felt guilty, would have rushed to fix everything. That woman was gone. "David, listen carefully," I said. "I'm not giving you any money. Not for your mortgage, not for your cruise, not for anything. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You and Lilia made reckless choices. Now you want me to face the consequences. You have the money." "I know you do. How I spend it is no longer your concern," I said quietly. "You made that clear when you threw me out." "We didn't throw you out. We just asked you to contribute more. You demanded $50,000 and struck me when I refused. Let's not rewrite history." Silence. Finally, he said, his voice harder. "Fine. But don't come to us when you're old and need help. After this, you're on your own." The threat might have worked on the old Marlene. The new me simply smiled. "I'm already on my own, David, and I'm doing just fine." I ended the call before he could reply. That evening, James and I shared dinner at a small Italian place by the harbor. I told him about the conversation. He listened, jaw tight. "How do you feel?" he asked as we sipped wine. "Relieved," I admitted. For years, I kept thinking that if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, David would finally see me as more than a source of money. Now I know. He never will. I'm done being anyone's backup plan. James reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. The words meant more than any grand gesture. Then his expression shifted. "There's something else," he said, thumb brushing my knuckles. "Our booking department got a reservation today. Next month's Caribbean cruise. A Mr. and Mrs. David Cooper." My heart stopped. They booked the trip? Apparently. Probably on credit. The same luxury cruise they said they couldn't afford without your $50,000. He met my eyes. "They'll be on our ship." I sat back, processing. David and Lilia were coming aboard expecting a lavish escape, paid for with borrowed money they couldn't possibly repay. James gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "The question is," he said, voice low, "what do you want to do about it?" They would stroll the decks, pose for selfies by the pool, and complain if their towels weren't fluffy enough, never realizing that the woman they'd dismissed was now part owner of the very company hosting their vacation. "I want to be there," I said at last. "Not to cause trouble, not to confront them. I just want to see who I am to them, now that I finally know who I am to myself." James nodded slowly. "The Sea Star is launching a new guest services initiative next month. Perfect chance for our new vice president of guest services to be on board, observing operations." "Vice president?" I raised an eyebrow. "Effective immediately," James replied with a grin. "If you're interested." 6 weeks earlier, I'd been sleeping in my car. Now I was a business owner, a woman with choices, authority, and a future. "I'm very interested," I said. James lifted his wine glass. "To new beginnings." To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking my glass against his. The morning of embarkation, I stood on the bridge of the Sea Star, watching passengers stream up the gangways. In the past month, I'd come to appreciate the elegant chaos of boarding. 1,500 guests, each expecting perfection. I'd been living aboard for 2 weeks, learning every corner of the ship. My cabin, just down a private corridor from James's, had become home. Our relationship had deepened quietly, like a conversation resumed after 40 years. "There," James said, pointing toward Gangway B. "Your son and daughter-in-law." My stomach tightened as I spotted them. Even from a distance, I recognized Lilia's designer luggage and carefully styled hair, the way she directed porters with a flick of her hand. David trailed behind, shoulders slumped, carrying the look of a man forever trying to please someone impossible to satisfy. "They look exactly as you described," James murmured. We'd studied the plan like a tactical mission. "Remember," he added, "you're Marlene Morrison now, VP of Guest Services. Today you're simply overseeing embarkation procedures. Marlene Morrison." I'd started using the name a week earlier. It wasn't just for business. It felt like armor, a shield for the woman I'd become. I descended to the main deck in a crisp navy blazer embroidered with the Morrison Maritime logo, my staff badge clearly visible. Outwardly, I reviewed check-in procedures, but inside I waited for the moment I'd imagined for weeks. An hour passed before I saw them again. Lilia arrived first, striding through the grand atrium as if she owned it. Her white sundress likely cost more than I used to earn in a month, and a diamond bracelet sparkled beneath the chandelier's light. David followed, wide-eyed like a child seeing a fairground for the first time. Despite everything, a flicker of maternal affection caught me off guard. They approached the guest services desk, Lilia already mid-complaint. "Excuse me," she said to Maria, our head guest services representative. "There's clearly a mistake with our cabin assignment. We booked a balcony suite, but we've been placed in some tiny interior room." Maria checked the computer with calm efficiency. "I have you in cabin 4127, which matches your confirmed reservation." "That's impossible," Lilia snapped. "I specifically requested a balcony suite." "I understand your frustration, ma'am," Maria said evenly. "Let me see what upgrades are available." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. "I do have balcony cabins open, but there would be an upgrade fee of $800 per night." "For a 7-night cruise," David said, voice tightening. "That's $5,600. David's face went pale. "Can't afford that," he muttered. Lilia shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't embarrass me, David." "We'll take the upgrade. We've already maxed out the credit cards just to pay for this trip," he whispered. "Then figure it out," she hissed, low enough that she thought no one else could hear. But I was standing close enough to catch every word. This was my moment. I stepped forward with a professional smile. "Excuse me," I said, addressing the desk. "Is there a problem I can assist with?" Maria, our head guest services rep, looked relieved. "Ms. Morrison, these guests are hoping to upgrade their cabin." Lilia turned to me, and for a split second, I thought recognition might flash across her face. Nothing. To her, I was just another staff member. "Finally, someone who might actually help," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "This young woman seems to think we can't afford a simple cabin upgrade." I looked at her steadily. This woman who had slapped me, evicted me, and tried to drain my savings. Now she was waiting for me to fix her problem. "I'm Marlene Morrison, Vice President of Guest Services," I said, extending my hand. "And you are?" "Lilia Cooper," she replied with a limp handshake. "This is my husband, David. We're celebrating our anniversary and need a balcony suite." "Of course," I said smoothly. "Let me see what I can do." I moved behind the desk and pretended to review their booking. David stood a little behind her, and for an instant our eyes met. A flicker of recognition, or maybe guilt, passed across his face, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "I see the challenge," I said after a moment. "Your booking was made fairly recently, so most premium cabins are occupied." "Recently?" Lilia's voice sharpened. "We booked months ago." I tilted my head. "According to our records, this reservation was made 6 weeks ago and paid with a card that was declined twice before processing." David flushed crimson. "That was a bank error." "Of course," I replied pleasantly. "These things happen." The power shift was electric. For the first time in our history, I held every card. They needed something from me, and I could decide whether they received it. "I do have one option," I said finally. "A balcony suite just became available after a last-minute cancellation." We can waive the upgrade fee as an anniversary gift from Morrison Maritime. Lilia's eyes lit up. Really? That's wonderful. There's one small condition, I added. The suite comes with dedicated concierge service, which means you'll work directly with me to ensure everything meets our highest standards. That sounds perfect, Lilia gushed. We appreciate excellent service. Excellent, I smiled. Maria will prepare your new keys. You'll be in the Sunrise Suite on deck 12. I believe it will more than meet your expectations. As Maria processed the change, Lilia leaned closer, lowering her voice. Between you and me, it's refreshing to deal with competent management instead of entry-level employees who don't understand customer service. I completely understand, I replied evenly. Great service is about giving people exactly what they deserve. 20 minutes later, I watched them head toward the elevators. Lilia practically floated with satisfaction, diamond bracelet flashing. David glanced back once. A flicker of something, uncertainty, recognition, crossed his face, but he said nothing. I returned to the bridge where James waited with a knowing smile. How did it go? He asked. They have no idea who I am, I said. Relief and quiet triumph mingled with a faint sadness that my own son hadn't recognized me. Are you okay? James asked gently. I think so. It's strange seeing them like this. They're exactly who I always knew they were. But when you're no longer dependent on them, it feels different. James nodded. Power changes perspective. They're in the Sunrise Suite now, I said. The one with the cameras. We'd chosen that suite deliberately. As part of our training program, a few cabins carried discrete monitoring systems. Fully legal, disclosed in the fine print, though almost no guest ever read it. And they have dedicated concierge service, James added with a half smile. With you as their concierge. With me, I confirmed, looking out over the harbor as the ship's horn sounded, signaling departure. Soon we were underway. 1,500 passengers and 600 crew members aboard a floating city under James's command. Somewhere below, in their upgraded suite, David and Lilia were likely ordering room service, planning their evening, blissfully unaware that the mother they'd discarded now controlled every detail of their perfect vacation. This time, I wasn't the victim of their story. I was the author of my own. Lilia's face brightened when she saw me, as if I were the solution to every minor inconvenience. Finally, management, she said loudly enough for half the dining room to hear. This server can't follow a simple instruction. I asked for dressing on the side, and she brought the salad pre-dressed. Completely unacceptable. Carmen stood stiffly, eyes lowered, but voice steady. I apologize, ma'am. I can replace the salad immediately. That's not good enough, Lilia snapped. I want to speak to someone in charge, someone who actually understands service standards. I felt the room's attention sharpen, passengers pausing mid-bite. The old Marlene might have tried to placate her instantly, eager to avoid a scene. But the woman standing there now, the vice president and part owner of this ship, had no intention of rewarding cruelty. You're speaking to the person in charge, I said evenly, my staff badge glinting in the light. I'm Marlene Morrison, Vice President of Guest Services. For a heartbeat, Lilia blinked, confused. Then she recovered, the condescension sliding back into place. Good. Then you can fix this. I turned to Carmen, my voice warm. Thank you for your professionalism, Carmen. You handled this exactly right. Please take a short break. I'll handle the table from here. Carmen's shoulders eased as she stepped away. Murmurs of approval rippled through nearby diners. I faced Lilia again, calm but firm. Mrs. Cooper, our crew is trained to meet high standards, but they are also human beings deserving of respect. Speaking to any member of my staff the way you just did is unacceptable. Her mouth fell open. Excuse me? You heard me, I said, my voice still even. We value every guest, but we have a zero-tolerance policy for harassment. Consider this a formal warning. Further incidents will result in restrictions on your privileges aboard this vessel. Color rose in her cheeks. You can't. I can, I said quietly, and I will. The dining room had gone silent. David stared at the tablecloth, his face flushed, but said nothing. I inclined my head just enough to signal the conversation was over. Enjoy the rest of your lunch. Then I walked away, leaving Lilia speechless and the surrounding passengers whispering. Back in the service corridor, my pulse was steady, not racing. The old me would have been shaken, but now I felt only clarity and a surprising sense of peace. When I reached the bridge, James looked up from a chart. a faint smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Word travels fast on a ship, he said. I hear you handled quite a scene. I didn't raise my voice, I replied. I just told the truth. That's what leadership looks like, he said, pride warming his tone. I gazed out at the endless blue stretching to the horizon. For the first time in decades, I wasn't reacting to someone else's choices. I was setting the course myself. And somewhere below deck, David and Lilia were discovering, inch by inch, that the mother they'd cast aside was no longer a silent witness to their lives. The cruise had only reached its midpoint. 7 days at sea. Plenty of time for more revelations. Lilia's voice dripped with false outrage. Marlene, thank God you're here. This waitress completely ruined my order and then argued with me about it. I glanced at Carmen, her eyes shiny with unshed tears, then back at Lilia. I'm sure it was a simple misunderstanding. These things happen. No, they don't happen when staff are properly trained. Lilia shot back. I want her fired. The dining room had gone still. Other passengers watched with that uneasy fascination reserved for public meltdowns. Mrs. Cooper, I said evenly, I understand you're upset. Perhaps we can step outside to discuss this privately. No. I want this resolved right here, right now. This girl doesn't deserve to work on this ship. I met Carmen's pleading eyes. I knew her story. 23, supporting her parents and younger siblings back home. This job meant everything. Actually, I said, letting a quiet edge into my voice, Carmen is one of our top crew members. She's been recognized for guest service excellence more than once. Lilia narrowed her eyes. Are you contradicting me? I'm providing accurate information about our staff, I replied, a steel thread beneath the polite words. Perhaps the confusion came from a miscommunication about your order. There was no miscommunication. She's incompetent, and you're clearly too inexperienced to recognize poor service when you see it. The insult hung in the air like a spark before a flame. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. I assure you, Mrs. Cooper, I said quietly, I have extensive experience in guest services. More than you might realize. Something in my tone stopped her. She studied my face with sudden focus. Don't I know you from somewhere? She asked slowly. Across the table, David finally looked up. Recognition spread over his face like sunrise. Mom, he whispered. The word dropped into the silent room like a stone into still water. Lilia spun toward him, then back to me, mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Hello, David, I said calmly. Hello, Lilia. A dozen emotions chased across Lilia's face. Shock, confusion, anger, humiliation, as the entire dining room absorbed what they'd just heard. You, she began, but her voice cracked. You're supposed to be homeless? Destitute? Begging you to take me back. I finished for her. I was for about 4 days. Then I found something better. David stared as if I were a ghost. How are you here? How are you on this ship? I work here, I said simply. Actually, I own part of it. The words hit like a wave. Lilia stumbled, catching the back of her chair. That's impossible, she whispered. Is it? I asked, letting the question hang. I turned to the other guests. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disturbance. Sometimes family dynamics can be complicated. Then I faced Lilia again. As for your complaint, I'll note that you attempted to have one of our best employees dismissed for bringing exactly what you ordered. Carmen, thank you for your professionalism. Carmen nodded, relief flooding her features. I looked back to David and Lilia. Enjoy your anniversary cruise. We'll have plenty of time to catch up later. I turned to leave, but Lilia's voice broke the hush. Wait, we need to talk. About what? I asked mildly. About everything. About what happened. About the misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding, I said. You made your feelings about me very clear. I gestured to the elegant room around us. As you can see, I've moved on. David's voice cracked. Mom, please. Can we speak in private? For a moment, the old instinct to comfort him flickered, but it faded beneath the weight of truth. We'll have time to talk tomorrow night, I said. I'll be on stage at the Welcome Aboard show with the other senior staff. Realization washed over both of them. I wouldn't just be introduced as crew, but as part owner of the ship. Lilia's face turned ashen. David whispered, Oh God, what have we done? I held his gaze. You got exactly what you wanted, a life without me in it. Then I walked away, leaving them in the hushed dining room, surrounded by murmurs of passengers who had just witnessed their public reckoning. I stood just off stage, the buzz of conversation swirling around me like a warm current. For the first time in decades, I felt completely weightless. No more hiding, no more pretending. James's voice still echoed in the theater. She's also the woman I'm going to marry. The audience's cheers had barely faded when I saw them, David and Lilia, making their way toward the stage. David's steps were hesitant, almost apologetic. Lilia's were quick and sharp, the stride of someone who still believed she could talk her way out of anything. "Mom," David said, his voice nearly lost in the hum of passengers congratulating James. "We need to talk." I smiled, the same professional, unshakable smile I'd worn for every guest this week. "I'm sure you do," I answered lightly, "but tonight I have business partner duties." "Perhaps another time." Lilia's eyes flashed. "You can't just—" I held up a hand, calm and steady. "This evening is for our guests. If you'd like to schedule a conversation, please contact my office through the guest services desk. My assistant will find a time, if my calendar allows." The words landed with quiet finality. Passengers around us pretended not to listen, but their curious glances said otherwise. David opened his mouth, closed it again. His shoulders slumped. For the first time, I saw the boy I'd raised finally understanding that the woman in front of him was no longer waiting for his approval. I inclined my head politely. "Enjoy the rest of your cruise." Then I turned away, my navy cocktail dress catching the stage lights as I stepped back toward James and the waiting crowd. Behind me, I heard nothing. No protest, no last-minute plea, only the soft murmur of other guests and the distant music from the ship's lounge. As the Sea Star glided through the moonlit Caribbean, I stood beside James on the upper deck. The ocean stretched endless and silver before us. "They looked stunned," he said quietly. "They'll be fine," I replied. "Eventually, they'll realize I'm not coming back, and that's the best gift I can give them." James slipped his arm around my shoulders. "To new journeys?" "To new journeys," I echoed. The night air smelled of salt and possibility. I had left the old Marlene behind forever. No longer a silent source of money, no longer a woman defined by someone else's choices. I was Marlene Morrison, business owner, partner, captain of my own life, and the horizon was mine. David's last words hung between us, raw and trembling. "I'll do anything. I'll leave Lilia if that's what you want. I'll beg. Just please don't abandon me." Once those words would have cracked me wide open. Once I would have rushed to comfort him, to patch over the damage, to rescue everyone but myself. But that woman no longer stood here. I drew a steady breath. "David," I said softly, "you don't need to perform. I'm not asking for anyone to kneel, and I would never ask you to leave your wife. This isn't about punishment. It's about responsibility." He blinked, startled by the calm in my voice. "For 37 years, I gave everything I had. Love, money, sleepless nights. I asked for only respect in return. When you chose silence as I was humiliated and cast out, that respect ended. What happens next is yours to decide. I truly hope you find a better way forward, but that path isn't mine to walk anymore." I turned to Lilia, who stood rigid and pale. "You both have the power to rebuild your lives, but the work is yours, not mine." James's arm tightened gently around my waist, a quiet reminder of the life I'd chosen. "Everything all right?" he asked, voice low but certain. "Everything is fine," I replied, meeting his eyes with a calm smile. "We're finished here." I gave David one last level look, not of anger but of release. "I wish you both well," I said. "Good night." Then I stepped away, letting the hum of the theater swallow the silence they left behind. Out on the open deck, the night air tasted of salt and freedom. The ship cut a bright path across the dark sea, and for the first time in my life, I felt no pull backward. Only the steady, exhilarating call of my own horizon. I was no longer someone's safety net. I was Marlene Morrison, partner, leader, and the author of my own story. The truth had been spoken. Even if David meant every desperate word, it was far too late. The damage was done. "David," I said, a strange pity settling over me, "I'm not abandoning you." "You abandoned me the night you threw me out. I'm simply accepting the reality you created." He looked stricken. "But you're rich now. You have everything you need." "Yes," I said evenly. "I have a business I love, a man who respects me, and a future full of possibilities. Most importantly, I have people who value me for who I am, not for what I can provide." I gestured toward the theater lobby, passengers laughing over champagne, crew members who had become friends, and James waiting just a few steps away. This is my family now. The words landed like a blow. David staggered back, the finality sinking in. You can't mean that, he whispered. I can, I said quietly, and I do. I'm done being your safety net. I'm done sacrificing my happiness for yours. I'm done pretending that blood means more than decency. Lilia made one last attempt. What about grandchildren? Don't you want to be a grandmother someday? The old me would have flinched. Instead, I felt only calm. Any children you have will be raised by you, I replied. Given your choices and priorities, I think they're better off without my influence. I took James's hand. This conversation is over. Together, we turned and walked toward the exit. Behind us, Lilia's voice rose in panic. David's pleas grew sharper, but I didn't look back. The Caribbean night wrapped around us like a warm embrace. The sea star sliced through dark water, the wake glowing with silver foam. How do you feel? James asked, drawing me close. I considered it. Free, I said at last. For the first time in my adult life, completely free. Any regrets? I thought of David and Lilia, of the grandchildren I might never meet, the family gatherings I would never attend. And I felt nothing but peace. None, I said, and meant it. James kissed me under the stars, gentle and sure. When we parted, he smiled. So, what do you want to do with all this freedom? I looked out at the endless horizon, at the life we were about to build. Everything, I said. I want to do everything. The next morning, David and Lilia disembarked at our first port of call. They didn't finish the cruise they'd gone into debt to afford. Instead, they flew home to face their mounting bills and their unraveling marriage without the safety net they'd once taken for granted. From the captain's deck, I watched their tender boat carry them back to shore, feeling only quiet closure. The old Marlene would have chased after them with apologies and a checkbook, but she was gone. I was Marlene Morrison, business owner, beloved partner, a woman of worth and dignity. At 62, my real life was finally beginning, and now I'm curious about you. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Have you faced a moment where choosing yourself meant walking away? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're here, stay tuned for 2 more of our channel's favorite stories. They just might surprise you. Thank you for watching, and remember, your true life can begin anytime you decide it does.